Welcome students. We are back with another lesson. Now, in our last class we were discussing the law of exponents and we have discussed up till this law. The x to the power m, x to the power n equals to x to the power m plus n. In our today's class, we will discuss the remaining laws starting with this one. So in this law, if I divide the same base numbers. In this case, look, the base is x, the base is x. Same base having different powers. Okay, x to the power m and x to the power n. In such case, what you can do is, you can write the common base x and you can send this n to the numerator. So if it goes to the numerator, it will become to the power of minus n. So I can write x to the power m minus n. Fine. Or you can also assume, like, suppose if I write this as x to the power m and x to the power n. Now using this law, where 1 upon x can be written as x to the power minus 1. 5 to the power minus 2 can be written as 1 upon 5 times 5. Fine. So I can add a negative power. If I take this, okay, now look, if instead of writing 25, I can write 5 square. Okay, so 5 to the power minus 2 can be written as 1 upon 5 square. So I can write the opposite case also. If I have anything to the power in the denominator, if I take it to the numerator, what happens? It will become a negative power. I can apply the same law here. If this is x to the power n, and if I take it to the numerator, this power n will become negative. Find x to the power m multiplied by x to the power minus n. Now using this law, I can write, if they have the same basis, then I can write the common base x, then I can add the two powers. Similarly, look here, they have the same base, so I'll write down the base first. Now add the powers. If I add the powers, it will be x to the power m minus n. Fine. So let's take an example. Suppose you have x to the power 4 and x to the power 2. What does the x to the power 4 means? X multiplied 4 times. And what does x square means? X square means x multiplied by 2 times. So in this case, what you do? You cancel this x, you cancel this x, you cancel this x, you cancel this x. So remaining how many x? 2x. So you write down multiply equals to 2x multiply, which can be written as x square. So using this law, you can simply write down x to the power 4, x to the power 2. So since they have the common base, write down the base first, then write down this numerator power 4, then write down the denominator power. But with denominator power, you add a negative sign. So it will be x to the power 4 minus 2. And what is 4 minus 2? It will be 2. Therefore, your answer will be x square. Fine. So instead of doing all of this lengthy calculation, you can directly write your result, x square. Fine. So in this law, you have to remember 2 points. The first point is that x divided by x, whenever you are dividing the same number having the same power, in this case the x has a power 1, in this case also the x has a power 1. So if you're dividing the same base with the same power, in that case the result will always be 1. Fine. So x upon x equals to 1. Similarly, if you have anything, okay, if you have anything to the power 0, then you can simply write it as 1. Okay, why? Because look here, suppose you have x to the power 2 divided by x to the power 2. This means using this law, I can write x to the power 2 minus 2. And what is 2 minus 2? 0. So x to the power 2 upon x to the power 2 is 0. Or what is x squared divided by x squared? X squared by x squared should always be 1. Why? The same base having same power, when they are dividing each other, they will cancel each other and leave only 1. That's why whenever you see x to the power 0, you will always replace it with 1. Fine. So these two are the important points which you have to remember. So here you can take this example. Suppose you using this law, if you have to divide x to the power 6 and x to the power 2, first check the base is same. Now what you do, take this 2 to the numerator, it will become minus 2, so it will be 6 to the power minus 2. Therefore your result will be x to the power 4. Fine. Now the next law states that if you have x to the power m inside a bracket, look carefully at this bracket. Okay, here you have a bracket, and outside the bracket you have to the power n. Then this law states that it will be equal to x to the power mn. Okay, look, this is different from this law. Why is it different? Because in this case you don't have a bracket, but in this case you have a bracket, so you have to be careful. Fine. So let's take example. Suppose you have x to the power 3 to the power 4. What does this power 4 means? You have to multiply anything which is inside the bracket how many times? 4 times. So you multiplied this x to the power 3 means x cube. Okay, so you are multiplying x cube 1 time, x cube 2 time, x cube 3 time, x cube 4 time, because it has a power 4. Now you count all of this x, you will get total 12x in this case. So you will write x to the power 12. Now instead of doing this lengthy calculation, you can simply use this law. So if you have x to the power 3 bracket, outside the bracket whole thing to the power 4. In that case what happens? You will apply this law, write down the base first x, then open the bracket. If you open the bracket, it will be 3 times 4 using this law. So 3 times 4 equals to 12. So your result will be x to the power 12. Fine. So let's take another example. X to the power 2 inside the bracket, whole thing to the power 3 cube. So first what do you do? Write down the base first x, then multiply 2 times 3, and 2 times 3 equals to 6. So it will be x to the power 6. Fine. So moving to the next law, it states that if x and y are inside the bracket and whole thing to the power n, then in that case what happens? This power will be added to this x to the power n, and this power will be included with this y also. So you have x to the power y whole thing to the power n can be written as x to the power n multiplied by y to the power n. So in this case you have for example you can take xy to the power 3. So what does this means? You have to multiply anything which is inside the bracket how many times? 3 times. So you have to multiply xy 1 time, xy 2 time, xy 3 time. Now if I arrange this one, I can write there are how many x? 3x, and there are how many y? 3y. So if I arrange this x together and y together, fine, like in this case. So in this case what it will be? It will be x to the power 3, and this will be y to the power 3. Now if you use this law instead, it will be very simple. Suppose you have x to the power y, xy whole thing to the power cube. Okay, now you can simply use this formula. So according to this formula, it is equals to x to the power 3 multiplied by y to the power 3. Fine. So you can take this this one which we have just discussed. Fine, x to the power 3 and y to the power 3. Now let us divide this whole thing power n with the division. So if I have x to the power y whole thing to the power n, okay, in such case it will be x to the power n, y to the power n. Why is it so? Let's take an example. Suppose you have x divided by y whole thing to the power 3. So first, what does this mean? You have to multiply anything which is inside the bracket 3 times. So 1 time x upon y, 2 times x divided by y, 3 times x by y. Fine. Now what you do? First arrange the numerators x, x, x. Fine. Now arrange the denominator y, y and y. So you have y. So on the numerator you have x cube. In the denominator you have y cube. So if you use this law instead, it will be simpler. Divided by your y to the power 3. Fine. So let's take another example. Suppose you have x divided by y whole thing square. Then you can write simply x square upon y square. Fine. Now let us discuss about this one. So the next law is your fractional law. So if you have anything divided in numerator you can write anything. Okay, for simplicity let's consider 1. So if it is 1 divided by x to the power n. Okay, so if I have to write this in the numerator, how will I write? This can be written as 1 times, this is multiplication sign, okay, and this is x. Okay, or instead of x let us use a. Fine. So 1 times, first write down the base here a, then if this whole thing goes to the numerator, then this to the power positive n will become negative n. Fine. So you have 1 times a to the power minus n, which in turn equals to a to the power minus n. Okay, let's take an example of this law. So if I have 1 upon 4 square, so if I take this 4 square, I write it in the numerator, then it can be written as 4 to the power minus 2. Okay, and one more thing, this minus 2 represents the square root of 2. So if this is square root, then what will be this number? 4 to the power square root of 2, and square root of 4 is 2. Fine. Similarly, let's take one more example. Suppose you have 27 to the power 3. If I write this one in numerator, then I can write this power 3 means your cube root, which means cube root of 27. And what is the cube root of 27? Cube root of 27 is 3. That means if you multiply 3 times, you will get 27. So cube root of 27 is 3. Right. Similarly, there are few more examples. Okay, I'll just write down those examples. So here you have 256 to the power 4. In the numerator it will be 256 to the minus 4. This represents the fourth root. So you can use your calculator to find out this value. Similarly, you can use the calculator to calculate this result. Okay, so these two questions you can take as your homework. So if you understood that fractional exponents, okay, this nth root, then you can understand this law also. So according to the law, if you have x to the power m to the power n, then you can write this one as x to the power nth root of x to the power m. Why I can write it like this? So if I have x to the power m upon n, I can also write it x to the power m minus n. Using this law, x to the power m upon x to the power n can be written as x to the power m minus n. Fine. Okay, so you can use this formula instead. And this formula is similar to this formula also. But if you want to derive this formula, what you can do is you write down x to the power m upon n. Fine. M upon n can be written as m multiplied by m multiplied by 1 upon n. Now you first take this x to the power m inside the bracket, and then you keep this 1 by n outside the bracket. And what does this 1 by n means? It means, suppose in this case, if it was n here, so instead of fourth, what will be? It will be nth root. So it will be 1 nth root of anything which is inside the bracket. So it will be x to the power n. Fine. So this is your final law. Okay. But instead of using this one, okay, I'll still suggest you to use this formula. Okay. Because this formula is simpler to get the result. Fine. Instead of using this one, you can use this one. Okay. Because most of the times what happens, most of the students make mistake while using this formula. So whenever you see x to the power m upon n, you can use this formula instead rather than this one. Okay. Because yeah, many of the students make a silly mistake. Right. So this is the last law, which is your fractional law. Fine. So I've discussed all of these laws. So in our next class, we'll discuss the laws. Why do we require this law of exponents and why we require the order of magnitude. Fine. So that's it for today's class. Thank you. And if you have any confusion, please don't hesitate to ask. I will re-explain it to you again. So again, thank you.